This is SEC Talk. What is going on, everybody? Welcome back. You heard it off the top. This is SEC Talk. We are getting back into everything fun, talking about the SEC. Got a lot of stuff to jump to in this episode. As you can see, it's just me by myself here right now at this moment. Cody is not here. Cody is not with us, but that's okay. You guys just continue the prayers and all that good stuff up for him. I am your host, Holden All. Glad to have you guys here with us. We got a lot to get to, a lot of games to get to. One game that we're actually going to review from this past week that came by, which we'll get to that in just a minute, that being Louisville and Ole Miss. Last time we talked with each other, that game was actually still ongoing, so we get to talk a little bit about that, which is pretty exciting. You guys, first and foremost, make sure you go and follow us on Twitter at SEC Talk 20. I'll keep it up at the top of this video. If you guys don't remember what it is, YouTube, I'm on it. Working on getting the video done right here, right now as we're going through doing this. So you guys check out the YouTube link. Obviously, we'll leave all these links in the description of this show, whether you're on YouTube, wherever it is that you're listening on podcast, it'll be there as well. The support link will also leave in the podcast links, or the description of the podcast at least. It'll be in the description of those. Probably not on YouTube, but not a big deal. Anyways, got a little bit of news that we're going to get to. First and foremost, we're going to go through it simple. Break down the game of Louisville Ole Miss at just a little bit. We don't have to dive too deep into it because at the end of the day, hey, Ole Miss ended up looking really good. Glad to see that as an SEC fan. We're going to go through all of the games from this past week. I know I'm going to be moving around a good bit if you're watching here on YouTube. Got this all rocking and rolling by myself, but break down all of these games. We got our picks in. I did get the picks from Cody, so that's one thing. I also got his top five. We'll review what I thought my top five was at the end of last week after all the games, and then Cody, I also got his. So we'll go through these. Got a little bit of Twitter content that we'll get to at the end of this episode as well, so you guys stick around for that. But without further ado, let's start it off. First and foremost, let's start things off with some news around the SEC. One of the first things that I read was, we talked about this last episode, was Lane Kiffin being out for that Ole Miss Louisville game. Think he's supposed to be back this week. I haven't seen any differently. I don't see why he would not be, because everybody being at 100% vaccination, the days you're just not out as long. You're normally out 14 days. In this situation, you're only out 10. So at the time of all that coming around, he should be good to go, because I believe that, if I remember correctly, I believe this actually happened prior to him, prior to game time. I know it was announced on Saturday. They didn't play till Monday, so more than likely this is something that maybe happened Thursday or Friday, so he should be through that protocol as far as having to sit out. News out of South Carolina, you have grad transfer, or grad assistant, I should say, Zeb Nolan that came in as quarterback there. It looks like Luke Doty is going to be back in the driver's seat there for South Carolina at quarterback, so keep an eye on that as they get prepared to start this week off, hopefully getting back to normal, I guess some sense of normalcy there with the quarterback that they plan on having throughout the season. Some strange news that I didn't really talk about on Monday, and I didn't pay quite as much of attention to, and I probably should have, and that's Vandy. Vandy, they actually removed the play calling duties from offensive coordinator David Rye prior to that Eastern Tennessee State loss. It's kind of a strange thing. Joey Lynch, who is the passing game coordinator, he actually called plays instead. Now, they still lost 23-3, so evidently whatever happened there was not working. I don't know what that means is going to happen from this point forward. I don't know if that's you get the offensive coordinator back in there calling plays, if they're planning on firing the guy. What? I'm not 100% what exactly it is that's going on, but something to keep an eye on there as far as things go there. Now, some big news. This is outside of the SEC, but it is news out of the Big 12. Let me pull it up here so that way I can read it to you guys. I don't have a lot of visuals to pop up on the screen. I may get to some of that this year. I'm not 100%. We'll see. It's just a lot of moving parts when you're doing two shows and pretty much back-to-back, trying to get them out at the same time to add all the visuals. Hey, I'm doing good to be on here right now doing this, so regardless, glad to be here. Glad you guys are listening, watching wherever you're listening, and if you're watching on YouTube, again, we really appreciate that. But this is breaking news out of the Big 12 that I read earlier, and that is all I believe, this was approved unanimously by the 8 continuing members. That is, the presidents and chancellors, voted for BYU, Cincinnati, Houston, and UCF to be accepted into the conference in a statement that was released by the Big 12. So all four of those schools, between BYU, Cincinnati, Houston, and UCF, obviously this being the news that follows after what happened over the summer there, which I guess technically we're still in late summer, with Texas and Oklahoma leaving the Big 12 and moving into the SEC. Supposed to be the 2025 season. I think pretty much at this point we all know that that's happening next year. So go ahead and write it in a book and be prepared for that coming up in the upcoming season. So that is a move that the Big 12 is doing in the process of those two teams exiting. They're going to add four teams. I was talking to Cody about it a little bit earlier, and he was kind of wondering why they would put four teams in there. I told him, hey, you got to have four teams just to cover some of the income that Texas was bringing into the Big 12. Obviously, the Big 12 not being part of that alliance, I guess that was formed between the ACC, Big 10, and the Pac-12. I will be honest with you, and I think I said it on here, the Big 12 is going away. It's gone. It'll be no more after all this. Never mind. They have proved us completely incorrect in that by adding these four teams. And to be honest with you, the four teams that they add, BYU, who was good last year, the year before that they were pretty good. Cincinnati, still good this year, good last year. That's another one. Houston, they've been good in the past. A little bit on the downward trend right now, but UCF is obviously they've been really good since their national championship win back in 2017. So, yeah, a little jab at them, but we're the SEC, so that's just the way we're going to do this thing. Couple of good grabs there. I will say that for the Big 12 as far as this goes. No, I haven't seen any kind of announcement as far as when this is, like a timeline. Are we talking about the same deal where, all right, they're marking it in the book 2025 when Texas and Oklahoma peace out? You guys, come on, hop in. Or is this a situation where they basically already know that Texas and Oklahoma are headed out the door and planning to go ahead and put them on this? I don't know. I don't have a timeline for you. That's just what I saw that was breaking news earlier today. Figured I'd add that to the podcast here and let you guys know it. So there you go. Take that and do with it what you will. Finally, last but not least, as far as the news goes, let me see if I can get this pulled up here for us real quick. That is the top 25 did break. Back after that, I guess Oklahoma or Ole Miss and Louisville played Monday, so it was Tuesday that top 25 dropped. And I'll actually go through it for you guys real quick here, just so you got it. Again, it's late in the week. Everybody, for the most part, has probably already seen this. But I'm going to go through it anyways, because you got some other SEC teams in there. Some of what we were talking about preseason is starting to come to fruition. A couple of these teams that we thought should be in the top 25 preseason, they're now finding themselves in the top 25. One of those being Ole Miss that did play Monday. We're going to get to that in just a minute, but let's run through the top 25. Alabama's still at the top spot, rightfully so. Georgia right behind them, again, rightfully so. If you're watching on YouTube, you know how I feel about that, but we'll get to it. Number 3, Ohio State. I mean, take it with a grain of salt because it didn't look all that great against Minnesota, but at the same time, I feel like Minnesota's not a bad team, so maybe it's okay to keep them at that 3 spot. Oklahoma at 4, they don't belong there. Until that defense can prove something, I don't think they belong there at all. To struggle with the Tulane team that more than likely could have beaten them, I don't see why they only fell 2 spots. If it's me, I still like Clemson above them. I know I talked about that last week, but that's just because Clemson and Georgia played such a great game. I think right now if Clemson and Oklahoma played, Clemson would beat them, because I think Clemson's defense is strong enough to slow Oklahoma, and I also believe that their offense is going to come alive. We'll get to that. Maybe not, because we're not an ACC, but I do think Clemson's offense is going to come alive, and I hope they do. I hope they score 140 points against every team that play for the rest of the season. Nonetheless, getting back to it, number 5, Texas A&M. Number 6, Clemson does come in that number 6 spot. Looking on down at number 7, you got Cincinnati. At 8, Notre Dame. Number 9, Iowa State. Number 10, Iowa. Good matchup at the end of this week. Penn State, 11. Oregon at 12. Florida at 13. Not moving anywhere. USC at 14. Texas jumps up to 15 after a win over Cody's Louisiana Ragin' Cajuns. UCLA jumps up in that top 25 spot there at 16 after taking down LSU, who Cody and I, again, back to what I was just saying, preseason we both thought that LSU was, both of us thought that LSU was overrated. And sure enough, you come into this season, I called it last week that I thought UCLA would upset and beat LSU. Sure enough, they do. You know, they looked good the week before that playing Hawaii. And And here they go. They get the nod. They're in the 16 spot, jumping up. Coastal Carolina moves up to 17. Wisconsin falls down to 18. Virginia Tech there at 19, coming into the top 25. Another team I thought would get in this spot and deserve to be here. Number 20, Ole Miss, another SEC team coming up. Utah up to 21. Miami falls down to 22nd after the loss to Alabama last week. Surprised they stayed in the top 25, but maybe they can turn things around. We'll see. Arizona State there at 23. North Carolina falls all the way to 24 after their loss to Virginia Tech, who again is now in that 19 spot, so they're giving them the credit for that. And the last SEC team does jump into the top 25 here, that being Auburn at 25 after not being ranked last week. A couple of teams that are actually receiving votes. LSU obviously fell out of that top 25. They're still receiving about 57 votes to get in. As far as the SEC goes, Kentucky, they've got a few votes to get in. App State's got one. So, yeah, that's pretty much it. If Mississippi State can kind of start to pick up things offensively, I think that they could also find themselves in the top 25 by at least the end of the season, I would hope. That's your top 25. Let's get into some of the Louisville and Ole Miss review from this past week because, like I said, last time we were talking, we were in the middle of that game, and it was right before the end of it. For the most part, we talked somewhat about it just because, again, we were right in the middle of it live as everything was going on. So I was at least able to talk a little bit with you guys about that, but nonetheless, let's see if I can go back to that week and get it pulled up because I had everything pulled up and then it went away. How about the Sunday game, though, the Notre Dame and Florida State game? You might not care much for that, and I didn't talk about it really, I don't think, too much on that Monday episode, but that was a good game. I think FSU may actually be pretty decent this year. We'll see, though. We'll see if Notre Dame can compete with anybody else. All right, here we go. Ole Miss, Louisville. Ole Miss does win 43-24, wasn't it? Let's see if it pulls up. Sorry, I know it's kind of delayed to get. If you're watching on video, it's not quite as boring. You at least get to look at some stuff. Podcast is not yet. 43-24. Big news out of this one had already happened when we were recording. I remember telling everybody about that. Was there were 4 targeting calls in that. Lane Kiffin was beside himself when interviewed after that game. With it, just some terrible calls, but 4 targeting calls, 2 on Louisville, 2 on Ole Miss. It's kind of tough there. In the end, Matt Corral, 22 for 32, 381 yards, 1 touchdown. Working on that Heisman campaign there, putting up that many yards to start it. Pretty good game overall for the most part. I mean, you go into the half 26-0. Ole Miss just kind of ran away with it. It wasn't really until the fourth quarter before Louisville started to try to make a game out of it, 36-10, about halfway through it, and then a couple of touchdowns coming from Malik Cunningham there at Louisville. Cut the lead almost in half there, 24-43 in the end, but Ole Miss got the job done offensively. And I will say this, Ole Miss's defense actually didn't look too bad in this one either, being able to hold Louisville down. Again, Louisville's not a world beater. They're not a team that's going to come in there like an Ole Miss, like an Alabama, that's going to put a heap load of points on you. So, take that however you want to take it, really. I'm still interested to see. We got games that are going to come up in the weeks to come that we will figure out, hey, is Ole Miss the real deal as far as defense goes? Because defense in situations here now in the SEC and multiple other situations has turned into something that, for the most part, just is no longer present in the SEC. Georgia, they've proven for the past few years they've got a defense, but they've got to figure out offense. Hopefully this week they can pick that up with a game against UAB. And we'll start off with a big one. No, this one's not a big one. Getting into some of the games here. Let's talk about Alabama State at Auburn. I thought I was going to read about Alabama-Auburn there, and I was like, wait, something ain't right here. We jumped to the end of the season, and I wasn't ready for that. Alabama State taking on Auburn. There's not even a line in this game when I was looking at it because it should be very similar to the Akron game last week for Auburn. One good thing for Auburn is coming into this game, I mean, you have that gimme game, cupcake game to start the season against Akron. If you had anybody injured coming out of fall camp, getting into the start of the season, guess what? You kind of got to work on those guys there. You got another week where you get to do it. It's not until, let's see, looking at the schedule here, Auburn week, next week. Next week they'll get the first test, traveling to Penn State. That's going to be a big one, big one. There we go. I was going to say I have my sheet over here somewhere. I don't have Auburn winning that game next week, but they're starting to improve. Again, they got cupcake games starting this season off. So, Tank looked good, rushing for over 100 yards, 2 touchdowns in the first game. Bo only had to throw the ball 22 times, almost threw for 300 yards in that at 275 with 3 touchdowns. Again, these are just gimme stats. Jeremiah Hickson, they've got a good that's actually the lead receiver there for Alabama State, excuse me. But both teams come in 1-0. This is another one. You really can't put stats up against each other too much because Auburn and Alabama State, they're just not on the same level. And it's similar to Georgia UAB that's going to happen this week. We'll jump down to it in a minute, but you really can't compare stats in some of these situations. I think Bo Nix is going to have a night similar to what he had against Akron. Same with Tank Bigsby. They should be able to run the rock really, really well against Alabama State coming into this one. We'll see how it goes. Let's jump on down to that South Carolina-East Carolina game. South Carolina only coming in as a 2-point favorite. 2-point favorite in this, traveling to East Carolina. And I think it may have been last week. No, it was earlier this week. I think East Carolina actually opened up as a favorite in this game. The line has since turned, and South Carolina has taken a 2-point lead in that. Maybe that's because you get Luke Doty back. Maybe. That may be the changing and deciding factor in that. I'm not real sure. Maybe that's enough to get you a line swing of 3, because I think at one point it was East Carolina 1. We'll see. Again, we get to the end of this show, just like we do every show. We'll do our picks and go through who we think, what exactly we think on it. But South Carolina, 2-point favorite. I'm excited to see what Luke Doty is going to look like in this. You got Zeb back there in the backup, Zeb Nolan, if you need him, I guess. But I want to see what he's going to do. Again, I talked about it a little bit last week. What is Shane Beamer going to do there at South Carolina to revive this program? Because right now it's dead. This program started to fall and has not stepped up, has not even got up off the floor since getting punched the last time. So South Carolina, again, on a downward trend. I don't have much for them this year. I'm not expecting a whole lot out of them this year. I think in the end I've got them 3-9 throughout the season, 1-7 in the SEC. They get 1 win, and that's over Vandy. That's just, at this point, I don't know I don't know if Vandy's going to win a game this season. So take that with a grain of salt as you will. We're going to talk a little bit about them at the end of this episode. But let's jump on down. Pitt and Tennessee. This is one that I'm actually calling on here for the upset. I just don't feel all that good about Tennessee here. You got Tyrion Evans there, running back. He looks pretty good. Just like it's been in the past, let's figure out this quarterback situation. Maybe they've got it figured out there in Tennessee. Maybe not. But at this point, I'm pulling more on that Tennessee pick that Pitt pick than I am Tennessee, because this is one of those games where, just like in the past, Pitt has been a team to come in and upset people. Take a Clemson, for example. It's happened. Pitt's come in there and stunned teams that are not supposed to get stunned in games. And I think this is the same kind of situation. Tennessee's not all that great this year. Again, I'm down on Tennessee as well. 5-7 throughout the season, 2-6 in the SEC. I just don't feel like they got it all figured out. They got a long way to go before they get to a situation where they have it all figured out. Let's see. I was trying to get some of the stats pulled up in this one, because this one is one that I think actually will matter. Again, that line is at 3. Over-under on that one's 56.5. That one, again, in Knoxville. How about Tennessee, though, getting to start the season, two home games to get things going? Oh, man, lost my page. You guys on YouTube, just bear with me. I will get it together. Let's see. I need to keep my pen clicked open so I don't have to make a lot of noise. Here we go. All right. It's 50-50 really on this. Leaning more the Pitt side. Again, obviously Pitt being a 3-point favorite coming into this one. Yards per game, points per game, leans more to Pitt in this one. Again, it's hard. The beginning of the season is hard to compare stats just because you've got such a limited amount of information in front of you. Total yards, Pitt put almost 600 on the board. Tennessee put up 475. Yards allowed, Pitt gave up less. And just about every category that I'm looking at, outside of passing yards allowed, which that's still better, the only thing that Tennessee leads in a category on is yards rushing. They rush the ball for about 100 yards better than Pitt. Maybe that's what they lean on in this. Maybe they lean on Terrion Edwards, like I was talking about earlier. Maybe they lean on him to be the rock, so to speak, carrying the rock in this game. Joe Milton, 11 for 23, 139 yards, touchdown. Again, not all that impressive. He's got a long way to go if he's going to really kind of come in and impress you as far as quarterback position goes there for Tennessee. Jumping down to that number 13, Florida taking on South Florida. How about Florida taking on another Florida team in South Florida starting this one? Huge favorite, 28.5. Over on that was 58.5 coming into it. My question is, who are we going with at quarterback there, Dan Mullen? You got Emory Jones? I don't know. Putting in Anthony Richardson? I don't know. One thing I will say, though, Emory Jones was a little bit better through the air. Not great. Threw 2 picks in the game. Did throw a touchdown, a little over 100 yards. Anthony Richardson didn't really throw the ball much. When he did, it wasn't all that great either. But he at least could run the ball. Again, 160 yards on the ground for a touchdown. Last game they played against Florida the week before. I think at this point, it's time to kind of start figuring out your pass game. Let's figure out who your quarterback is going to be down there in Gainesville, because eventually everybody's going to start getting tired of, okay, let's back and forth. Let's figure it out here, Dan. Let's stop jumping back and forth. Especially you get a guy who's in there, and if he starts to light the world on fire and you decide, oh, well, he can throw the ball really well, but I need a guy who can run it in this situation. And you're just constantly moving in and out. And if it doesn't work for you, you've got to eventually establish a quarterback, put him in, let him build the chemistry with the team around him. And if you're going to win a championship, you got to rely and put faith in that guy. Maybe we'll see that. Maybe we see Anthony Richardson start this game, see what his arm looks like, see if it improves from last week. Obviously, we know he's got the ground game covered. He can get out of the pocket and get loose and run for plenty of yardage, almost running for a little over 150 yards last week. So, you know he has that capability. Let's see what his arm can do. Emory Jones, I think he is also a guy who can run. He just wasn't nearly as successful as Anthony Richardson was last week. So, let's keep an eye on that for Florida. What's that quarterback situation look like? I don't know. I'm curious to see what happens with it, but we'll get to it. UAB in Georgia, we'll get to that one. That one at 1 o'clock on ABC. Sorry, I should have been telling you what these are. Alabama State, Auburn on the SEC Network at 12 o'clock. ESPN2 is South Carolina, East Carolina at 12 o'clock. Also 12 o'clock on ESPN is Pitt at Tennessee. ABC is that one, that Florida at South Florida. 1 o'clock on ABC. At 3:30, ESPN2, UAB in Georgia. Georgia, a 23.5-point favorite. That line has dropped pretty significantly here lately. I actually saw it all the way up at 26, I think, just as simple as last night. Some of that is probably because of the conversation swarming around Georgia with the possibility that JT Daniels has an oblique strain, and if he's got a strain, then he's out for a few days, probably doesn't play in this game. If he's got a tear, he's out for a few months, possibly could end the season right there. Would hate to hear that if it was the case for JT Daniels, because didn't really get to see any kind of explosiveness from that Georgia offense last week in a defensive battle in Charlotte against Clemson last week. So was looking forward to getting to see some of that from JT. Looks like we may or may not get that from JT this week. We'll see. We'll see what shakes out once the game starts. More than likely you're going to see backup in Carson Beck coming into this one. A guy who he didn't play last year. I mean, he was there, but he didn't start in any kind of games or anything like that last year. But nonetheless, he is still an experienced quarterback. He has been in the program for a year, so he's been behind JT Daniels, learning from him, also learning just how the program works, the ins and outs, buying into the scheme, listening to Todd Monken. Between spring game, he looked really good in the spring, looked good throughout fall camp. So as far as a backup goes, I think he's everything you could want in a backup in case JT Daniels doesn't come up. And not knocking on UAB, but in this situation, Georgia should be able to handle UAB. UAB is coming in a pretty strong defense, and could, potentially slow Georgia up in that aspect. But I don't think they're going to be able to come in and do like Clemson does, where they're dropping 7 and 8 and relying on that front line, your defensive line, to be able to stop the run game, which Clemson did fairly well. I think Georgia was held to, under 200 yards rushing in that game. So don't think UAB is going to be able to do that. I look more for UAB to probably stack the box try to take the run game away. Try to prove, all right, well, whether it's JT with a possible oblique strain in the game or Carson Beck, let's see what we can make him do, see if he can make mistakes. In the end, I don't think that's going to matter. I don't think you're going to be able to put enough pressure on it. I'm not sure that Georgia's offense opens up just yet with the possibility of Carson Beck being in there. Again, that's not me saying that Carson Beck isn't good and that he couldn't come into this game and kind of light the world on fire, because there is always that possibility. If let's just say, for example, if JT was to start this game and you were to have maybe him have a little bit of discomfort in that first game, and you get Carson Beck in there. Flashback to 2017 season, Jacob Eason is starting the game against App State, gets hurt in the first drive of the game, pops that knee, and then boom, guess what? You get Jake Fromm in there, and he didn't come out for the rest of the season. So, and they went on to win an SEC championship, win a college football playoff game against Oklahoma, a huge one, and then fall in the national championship to Alabama. You kind of have flashbacks of that. Could that be a situation here? I don't know. We'll see. That'll be something to watch for Georgia there. Their defense is going to be stout. Probably won't let UAB score in this game. So I'm not at all worried about that side of the ball. They've got a powerhouse running back room. I mean, you got Zamir White. You got James Cook, two of the veterans on the team. You got Mackenzie, man, I'm blanking on his name. Anyway, you got Kendall Milton back there. I didn't see Dejon Edwards last week. Was kind of curious about that, but you've got plenty of guys out there. So Georgia should still be able to run the ball, and if you take it away, that'll be the question again this week, is offensively for Georgia, because I think they're still pretty beat up on the offensive side of the ball. Their offensive line proved that they could protect the quarterback, so that's a good thing. But the wideouts, you leaned on Brock Bowers. Maybe he has a huge game at the tight end position this game. We'll see. So Georgia, again, 23.5-point favorites, 3:30 on the ESPN2 there. Jumping down, still at 3:30 on Fox, you get number 5, Texas A&M taking on Colorado. Haynes King, man, didn't he look good coming into last week, throwing for right at 300 yards, 2 touchdowns, 21 for 33. Devon Achane, 12 carries, 124 yards, 2 touchdowns again. In a game where at halftime they didn't look quite as well, they looked a lot better in this one coming in. Now, you do have a Colorado team who's also 1-0. Texas A&M is only, even being ranked 5th, is only a 17-point favorite coming into this one. So this is a much closer line than I think some people anticipated. But, again, Colorado is a team who they've got a quarterback too. He's kind of in that, learning curve. But defensively for Colorado, could be a situation, and you're traveling to Colorado. You're not at the 12th man there. So could be a little bit of a test. I don't think. Let me rephrase that. I don't think this is necessarily a test as much as it could be a trap game. Now, as I say that, I don't think Colorado is going to beat Texas A&M, but there are situations you come into here, just like a Tulane Oklahoma in week 1. Tulane shouldn't have been in that game with Oklahoma, but they were till the end, till the very end. So something to look at. Over/under on that one is 50. Right down the middle, even. I want to see Haynes King continue to improve and see if he has a big game in this, because I think if you get that Texas A&M quarterback situation figured out there, you got a big one. And that's been my question throughout the preseason is, let's see what happens at quarterback there, because you got a good running back still. Your defense is usually pretty good. So let's see what they can do. Can Texas A&M prove that they belong in the top 5? Can they prove that they're here to battle with Alabama at the top of the SEC West? And at this point, everything I was talking about before, Ole Miss, Texas A&M, Alabama being at the top of the SEC West looks pretty good right now. Auburn's trying to fight their way up there as well. We'll see. I think that week 3 is going to be a little bit of an eye-opener for Auburn. They get this easy, I don't know, it may be a boost that Auburn needs to get these couple of easy games to get those guys confidence and what have you coming into the season. Maybe that's just enough to make Auburn pretty decent this year. But at the end of the year, I think you're still going to have Texas A&M, Ole Miss, Alabama fighting for that top position in the SEC West. So take that how you will. Moving on down to 4 o'clock, SEC Network, another game that doesn't have a line on it, doesn't need to. The Mercer Bears out of local Macon, Georgia, taking on number 1 Alabama and the Crimson Tide. What do you want me to say? What do you want me to say? I mean, again, there's not a line on this because Alabama should go in and probably beat them 77-0. It's very well possible that that's the score. The only reason it may not be is because they decide, all right, let's call the dogs off. Bryce Young is going to prove yet again this week why he deserves to be at the top of the Heisman candidacy list and probably throw for 400 yards and 4 more touchdowns and just start to pad those stats and be really good in here. Again, I just don't have a lot to break down in this one because there shouldn't be anything. Alabama should be able to absolutely rock and roll in this game. Again, 4 o'clock, SEC Network. Turn around to the big game of the weekend as outside or inside at least of the SEC. Number 15, Texas, traveling down to Arkansas at 7 o'clock on ESPN. Texas, a 7-point favorite coming in this one. 56.5 is the line. You get Hudson Card there at quarterback for Texas coming in after a big game last week against Louisiana Raging Cajuns. 224 yards, 2 touchdowns. KJ Jefferson for Arkansas made a mistake last week. Also did throw for a touchdown. He's got to have a step up in this game. If Arkansas is going to win this game, KJ is going to have to be one of the guys who comes in and lights the world on fire. I know I use that analogy a lot, but he's going to have to be a guy who takes control of a game, to be quite honest. If Arkansas's defense can pick up a little bit where they were last week, but also where they were last year in a game, take Georgia, for instance, starting the season. Arkansas was winning that game at halftime, had a chance and an opportunity to win the game had they stayed in it, but you can't just play a half a ball. So if they can pick up where they left off as far as that side of things goes defensively, and Jefferson there for Arkansas can pick things up, I think they win this game. We'll get to the picks here in just a little bit, but also see if they lean on that run game. Texas does have a good defense. Again, you've got a good quarterback there in Hudson Card for Texas. So that back end of Arkansas, that's a question. Let's see. Are they going to be able to keep up with more than likely what's going to turn out to be more of an air attack than a ground game for Texas here in this one? You are coming into a ruckus environment there at Arkansas, Razorback Stadium in Fayetteville. So that 7-point, I mean, that's pretty close. That's a pretty close line to have right there. Let's see. I was trying to see if I had anything pop up there. Didn't, but we'll get to the picks here in just a minute. I'll stop saying that. I know you're tired of hearing it, but this is the game of the weekend in the SEC for me. I'm looking forward to seeing what Arkansas can put up against Texas. I know Texas is coming to the SEC next year, but I'm still looking forward to seeing what Arkansas can do in this. Because anybody in the SEC right now, I want them to take Oklahoma and Texas down. You know, you get Arkansas to get a big win right here against Texas, and it's like, hello, welcome to the SEC. This is a team who 2 years ago was not 100% similar to Vandy, but they're sitting at the bottom of the SEC West for multiple years in a row, not even winning games in the SEC for a few years there. That was rough. It got rough over there in Fayetteville for Arkansas. But hello to waking up and saying welcome to the SEC Texas if Arkansas can come into this one and win it. And moving on down, same time on ESPN2, you got NC State at Mississippi State. They've got this line really close as well. NC State is a 1-point favorite coming into this one. Over-under on this one is 55.5. I'm surprised. I know NC State's good, and I know we talked about this a little bit last week, was NC State's not a bad team. Watch out, because this is a team that can come in and upset Mississippi State, but I just don't see it happening. I don't see it happening. I think Mississippi State with Will Rogers, even though he made a mistake last week, I mean, throws for 370 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception. At halftime, that game didn't look good. Going into the third quarter, that game didn't look good. It took a major comeback in the fourth quarter for Mississippi State to finally get on their high horse and say, hey, what are we doing? What are we doing? Why aren't we just sitting here letting these guys play with us? Never should have happened in the first place, and I think they wake up from that. I think Will Rogers hopefully picks up where he left off in the fourth quarter, throwing for 3 touchdowns in that, or scoring 3 touchdowns in the fourth quarter. And Mississippi State's offense decides to pick up right there from the fourth quarter of that game to the first quarter of this game against NC State. They do that, they're going to be fine. That defense has also got to stand up. I put a lot of praise and high praise into Will Rogers on the offensive quarterback for Mississippi State preseason. Let me see if I can fix my camera here, guys, because my camera's going out on me. Seriously. Well, that stinks.